Good afternoon. This is Ronan Stanchfield, RJ Stanchfield. You can call me Scratch. Ron, I can't help doing this. It's just that I don't really know my name. Anyway, what I want to talk about this time is the idea of paying for additional work of a writer who doesn't have too much money. And I wanted to tell you about what I've done in the past and what I recommend people do. And it's a kind of a good idea rather than see you mortgage the house to spend big bucks for an editor or, you know, all kinds of different, someone who would do engineering on your audio book or, I'm going to try to save you some time and effort and show you the intelligence behind it. This particular episode or this particular session, I'm going to call it a session if you don't mind. This particular session is about me and um, editors I've used. Now, first, I got to give you a long line of writing. I first wrote my first book when I was 16 or 17 years old. And I don't want that to sound, oh, isn't that wonderful? It wasn't wonderful. It was easy. And the reason it was easy is because I had a lot to say. I had a story idea, and I said it. And then I said, well, I'll send it out. I sent it out, and back then you would have to type it up and send it a thick envelope to one publisher, and you couldn't send it to many publishers. You could only send it to one if they got wind that it was elsewhere. They'd both tell you, get lost with your manuscript. So I learned early that this was going to be a tedious process. The problem was I was too busy living and getting high and, having fun, and I didn't care. So the first book called The Goombean Man, and I still have it, and I'm still going to rewrite it. I hope I have enough time for it. Or I'll steal stuff from it because some of it's like, I'm going, whoa, that's really great. But that's 16 years ago. To be honest with you, that's 60 years ago I did that. And it sat there and sat there and sat there. I was shocked that I still had it. Although I had the smarts to get it digitized at some point, and it was on as a file in my earlier computers. Problem was I almost lost it even at that when I gave away one of my first Macs and forgot to get it, and I had to, it was a long to do. Anyway, so that's when I wrote my first book, and I've written a couple of books since then, maybe 4 or 5. But what I wrote more than a couple of books, and I think that's what made me realize that I was a writer at heart. In other words, if my dad was a musician and my mom was a dancer, they all did all things entertaining, but if their primary was a musician and a dancer, my primary was my brother's primary was that of a cartoonist. And he's out of this world as a cartoonist. He never did it professionally, just like I never did writing professionally, and I'm only starting it now. And so it grew out of a very creative family, but it was also grown out of a family that was very, very non-functional. And I say that with a laugh, but I also have said it with a cry in therapist's office. But it's okay, because I love my parents, I love my brother, everything's hunky-dory, we love each other. And they're not here, but they know that I've come to whoever you go to get that straightened out. So anyway, let's get to the brink of this. One of the first things you're going to need is to have a good editor look at your book that you've written and give him carte blanche to do what he has to do. So I thought. So I thought. I spent, after really negotiating with him, about $2,000 I didn't have to spend. And I was sick about it. I couldn't believe it. And I said, okay. And by the way, one of the things I didn't know how to do is to read editor's notes. So it was a real loser. It was a killer for me. I said, oh, why bother? And then I learned about critique groups. And I said, oh, these are smart people who want to read and they want to write and they want to help others who want to read and write. And I started to go to them. And that was the first real good thing. Generally, there's virtually no cost. Yeah, you have to buy some paper and ink for the printing that you do and stuff like that, but there's no significant cost. So whatever you do, even if you're in high school and you're just getting into writing, join a writers group, because they're not age based. They're not color based. There's no identification there. You're a writer and that's the end of it. The first part of it and the end of it. So you get into a critique group or a writers group. They're all over the place. The sooner, by the way, here's something. If you don't like it, get out of there. Find another one you like. So that's the first bit of information. Now, the next bit. Let's say you've done it. You've got your first novel or your nonfiction done on how to create toilets for dogs. I did that once, so I had to pull that out. Anyway, and I was thinking about writing about that too, but it's not in the cards. In any case, now you really do need an editor. And I met someone in my class, my group, my critique group, and she kind of liked my story from the reading of it. And I liked her, and she was much younger. She was in her teens. She was very much younger than most people. Most people were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and etc. And so I asked her, I said, I can't afford much, but I'd like you to take a shot at editing my book. Lo and behold, the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, let me compare it to something that you should know from the rest of the world and show you why it's so good and why I believe I made a great, brilliant, not a brilliant choice, lucky. This is a real lucky thing that happened to me. So let me tell you about it. Back then, when I was 15 or 16, there was a great quarterback out of Alabama. His name was Joe Namath. You may remember Joe came out of Alabama within 1 year, and the American Football League and the National Football League were just getting together, and it was the first Super Bowl. Now, I might be telling this story a little off, but correct me if you can. And the Jets managed to get to be in first place in the American Football League, but everyone said, how are they ever going to beat Johnny Unitas and the Baltimore Colts? Johnny Unitas, arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks who ever lived, as is now Joe Namath. But Joe Namath, he had the vision and he had the mission, and he focused and focused and focused. He played what might have been the greatest football game ever played, and the Jets beat the Colts. And a new man arrived on the scene. His name was Joe Namath, You haven't stopped hearing about him. He's doing he's doing old man commercials now, and I love it. And it's you see that and you just say, oh, that's great. Um, that's one story. My editor is just like that. There's another editor of mine coming down the pike that you'll appreciate. Perhaps the greatest man in history. Perhaps. You may not know his name if I told you his name when he was 16 and 17 and 18. His name was Cassius Clay. Cassius came from the South, and he was a street kid, but he became a boxer and he had some good trainers. And he was in the PAL, and then he went into tryouts for the, what do you call it? Not the World's Fair, but the Olympics. Guess what he did? At about 18, I think, he became the winner of the uh, statue of the Olympic statues. He got that for first place for the heavyweight division. And so therefore he was immediately drafted into the, professional league. And he had a way about him. He was very funny. He was very handsome man, and everyone loved him. He just had so much. He had, I guess, what you would call super duper, attraction to people. There was a magnetic attraction to this man. It's Muhammad Ali. And as you may remember, Muhammad Ali he was an activist. He was a black activist. He was a Muslim. And he objected to the war. And because he objected to the war, they objected to him and they threw him out of boxing. He stayed the course, he came back in and he won. And then he began his real work, and his real work was expressing himself about the problems of mass pandemics of racism. And he was a brilliant, wonderful man, and God, I could cry about him when I think about him. So that's the second editor I'm telling you about. He was a real editor for all of us. Now, the third, those of you who only know horse racing will know. The rest of you won't. But trust me, this young kid is perhaps equal to Joe Namath and Muhammad Ali. Who is he? Okay, let's put it to you this way. The big man to be won at the horse race track, the other jockey who was really world well known, was Eddie Arcaro. He was one of the greatest jockeys that ever lived, and he could take a house. He can't ride a house. He would take a horse, take it to the track, and for the owner, he would know exactly how to run. He became one with the horse. You ever see that commercial on television about the motorcyclist who's one with the cycle? I think he's called Motar. All right, this kid was like that. He just embraced the horse. He became horseman. I'm trying to use the, never mind, forget about it. In any case, Steve Hawkins was his name. And his first race, he lost bad. But the time he had his third race, he was winning every race or coming in second. He was incredible. But the big day of big days was when he had to do what was it? Oh yeah, there was a horse that was running in the grass all the time. And that horse couldn't do a thing. It would try to run and it couldn't do a thing. It always came in last. All right. Eddie Arcaro got him to win a few races. But then Eddie Arcaro stepped down and this kid stepped up. Not only that, they took the grass horse and they put him onto the dirt track. It's called turf to dirt, the turf of the grass and the dirt of the ground. So he was a jockey who was coming in, a not know nothing jockey um, who didn't have an iota of what Eddie Arcaro had. And he didn't, and he also had a horse that was running in a track that he wasn't familiar with. All right, in a long distance race, because the turf horses, the races in the turf are often slower. They're an eighth, 3/8 of a mile or a half a mile at most. Um, the kid took the dirt horse. He went a mile and a quarter or a mile and an eighth and won it. And it was the most magnificent win ever. Well, Steve Hawkins became one of the most well respected and well known jockeys worldwide because he loved the sport so much he would race or go to races with horses all over the world. And that's why I looked at him and I said, all three of these guys had one thing in common. You know what that is? No experience. They all had no experience. I mean, they had street experience. They had, let's wait a minute, they had their kinds of experience, what they had in their minds, in their spirit, in their consciousness. But they didn't get formal training for this. And yet, they became superstars, all of them. I have such an editor, okay? And you can have editors too. And I'll give you a hint. Let's say you want to do a commercial about your character in your novel, and you want to just make him three-dimensional and talking. Produce a movie for, an hour, not an hour, but produce a 5-minute show of what the story's about and who it is. So you write it because you're already a writer, and you get it edited, and you get a friend to edit it, and it's there. And now you need an actor, and you need a producer, you need a sound guy. Where do you go? You have no money. Here's what you do. You realize that in high school and college, all over this country, all over the world, kids are dying to be actors. They're dying to be production people, to be audio engineers and stuff like that. And they're going to school. And if you go to the school and you see the people there, say, look, I'm looking for a good actor. Oh, we have a young man who's about 6'3", he's on the football team, but he loves to act. He turns out to be the next Marlon Brando. You see, and you find these people, you find them, and where do you find them? You find them in the schools, the high schools, and even the colleges. Because one, if they want to get paid, and you can pay them whatever you can afford, and you should make it some sort of a payday for them. You may want to buy a nice gift that they gain when they finish so that they have something, and you give them a trophy and sort. I mean, there's all sorts of creative ways to do this. And what you get is you get the love and devotion of other people, where people tend to support what they help create. Remember that. People tend to support what they help create. And that's what you look for. You look for those kinds of creative people. In everything you do, at any point, you can find it. You may not have any money, but if you have the thinking about it, you'll find something. You'll have kids do it. They'll overact and they'll be cute. I mean, it's the first thing that came to my mind. Forgive me if you don't like it, but I mean, you can make it into cartoons. You can do it some different ways, make a comic book out of your own book. I mean, all different things can be done to help promote your book. Okay, I think I got the message across. The big one is go to students. By the way, you see this on my thing? It says 84 lumber. I'm going to cross out the lumber. And the reason I'm going to cross out the lumber, because I'd like to live till I'm 84. Okay, that gives me 8 years. You know, and then who knows what I can find to wear. All right. All right. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.